tăng kê tu chi cha cha ra sun ro jin cha ma ta de cha bon jong ba ser cha lam bo da bra ji ba ke shak che cha ba jab dang go zan za tur jen chan che de lo na ro dang ba ba ma la chu che gam bo ba pa mo zhe ba ja wan zhe gong ba ka ju la ma nam je da jo je da nan dan zhe ra tam je de la ma la ba la ye ji zo zo lab zang yong dian jiang zhe nga la wan din zhe dong jin zhe be ge le zo da ge lo chu zang zhe wa zhen jie lab de ju lam de zhe wa zhen jie lab de zo lan zhe wa ze wa zhen jie lab de zo zhe wa yi ji zhen jia wa zhen jie lab de zo gang ge din jian zhe wa ren jiong ge ba me ba jie me ba qi ba me ba da me ba wa me ba zhuo me ba ta de du me dun jie me zhu ba ni jie jie den ba zu bu san jie ma nan jie dan ba de la xiang za du zhen jin za ba la ma ji jie ku zong du jie zhen lan da 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 ge jue lan bu de da ge den ba dan sun jie jie dong jia jin bong zhe ba ra zhen jie la du so nam ka tang nyam bu sim jin tam jie ju dong de den de la na mi ba yang da bu zu bu san jie jie gong pang rong bo ji to bu xia di ji de dan bu ju kan ke sin de dong nyam se la war jiu nyam bu san ba jiang qiu jiu de sim ji ba dang去年被关注的古龙马诺如果呢，先班查。
So cultivating motivation thinking. I will establish all sentient beings limitless space in a state of perfectly complete enlightenment. And for that sake, I'm going to listen to the Dharma and then engage in practice to cultivate this motivation of Bodhichitta, which is the unmistaken motivation for listening to the Dharma.
다들은 Gong Chik wo ma zong hu la de kamur kai xie ji xue samsung dan de ting ge de wo ji ji go you ren de nam ju yin la ting ge jie ne de so so ran ni la yang ting ge yong ge you re de le ti ne de ne pin to rabri na yin la pin to yong tu ge you re de ma ri na so so la pin to ro yu zang yang nam ju ji so so ge la ke pin yo ba dan da ke ne do ma yin ba ko ro chu to ne yin zang de ne zhe ke xie ji xu na samsung dun dun arang zu zu de se yo ba na wo chi rin do.
So before we come to the teachings on the Gong Chik, I wanted to just share a few words for a few minutes before that, kind of as a reminder for all of us. And if you're often if you remind others of something, you're also reminding yourself. And so ideally you're benefiting others by doing that, but at least you're benefiting yourself. But of course, it's not for the sake of one's own benefit. It has to do with the Dharma. So anyways, since we have a little bit of time, I'm going to share those few words.
Tate kare hiyan sina cheta ngarang zo geda namba sanje bo ge chu seban de zhe yong de nim jong ge zi xin go yo ba re den da yan zang gambo ba ge lo chu sun ro war xin ji lo se jen de re lo chu sun ro war si ba la nim jong yo go yo re nim jong hi ban de kowa dongha ke jamso yemba tene ngusi ne tene tele thandu ko lo de ngimjong cha de yore tene kowa ande dongha ke jamso yende bande tene perna ngarang chu ji so ke lu ji bu ko thon sam na ta ma yena ya tene mundu bane ta na cha la so ba da 생고토니 인양 드네제 소소로 요바 탐제 그 마찬바 telo soba ke tene chapa ta dangwa teso jisndra yundu gang taryang je luge to ne soso la natsan do mixer majung na yang tene sem ko thola tena kanga yo de ba ta soso rang che lusem de lulung do yin yang ta soso ge zho mo dang tene pama punchi la so ba yang na yulong da jakap la so ba la yang kanga yo ndu tele tu ba ke yang kanga ji yo de ba ta de so chama je ozam yu ne yang je jungwa namda tu ge la so ba ke tene trukjin la so ba la tene kanga dam na so yong de ba gang tar yang thombo ya je jarbo ni ma changbo yin che ge la che ho nima re na na ri dundha re na yang na dawa re ta ba na che kanga che mi msi pa ta ba che danda che chang ban de da gang ke lin sung ba re sina ko wa ko rang ge chuni da wo che cha de yo re tene den ko wa ge chuni yin ban de la yong go dun de nga so che lemde ke to ni le sa dan che gen de la che wa la yong ba da tena yin de danda sa no de ko go yo ba re
And so in general, for the practice of the Buddha Dhamma, we need to have renunciation. And Khenpo had said that, bless me that my mind may turn toward the Dharma. For the mind to turn toward the Dharma, we need renunciation. And for that, we need to recognize the ocean of suffering, samsara. And then when you have a wish to become liberated from that, that is renunciation. And so when we think about the suffering of samsara, when we think about our own bodies, we experience all sorts of dissatisfactory things in our bodies, and also illness and so forth. And in our minds, we are not content with what we have, and we always follow thoughts of attachment and aversion. And even if we do not experience a certain illness in the body, we experience difficulty in the mind. And even if body and mind are both in a relaxed, peaceful state, then we might see that our friends or parents or relatives or places and countries and so on experience difficulties, and that creates difficulties in our minds. And even if all of that is going fine, then we might run into unexpected circumstances like changes in the elements and seasons and wars, all kinds of difficulties that we might run into. And so from the highest king to the lowest beggar, each and every day and week and month and so on, it's we always run into difficulties. We can't avoid it. And that is just the nature of samsara. And the reason why we are in samsara is because of karma. We have accumulated karma which has caused us to take birth in this existence. So that is what we have to reflect on.
Ta tenda yin zang, ta te che pen chun zang ri ma to te lo mangwa ta xie de na xie ji ma lang ba ke tenda ke ta ko wa de dong ha ke jiang zo yin ba ne dang tenda ri nga zo lo do na bi la so ba gom de ni ren be gong go yor wa te yin zang te ni jing mi ling ba ke thar pur lam la tang bo juk bu go song ko ne ne tang bo tru pu lam song nyam ni chu na kun je tang bu go song nyam ni ku chu tham je ke da thoma go tang bo de te ni ju mi ngim jong je war jin je lo song de yin zang
So this is just one example, but of course there's many more things that could be said about that. But basically the ocean of samsara is by nature suffering. And so we reflect on that gradually as we reflect on the four thoughts that turn the mind. Jigme Lingpa had said, like, bless me to give rise to renunciation when I first enter the path of liberation, to be liberated from the ocean of samsara. Then help me to enter first, help me to have renunciation to first enter the path of liberation, and help me to have renunciation to traverse the path, the ocean of samsara, and also to recognize all phenomena as nirvana.
Tene gambo ba ge chu lamden ro war sin jilab sondwa ni bandala. Chu lamden ro tangde zo chekyu de da zo chekyu zen ro zo de le jimde la ngishi che go yore. Le jimde shibande nyecha rang jiktin sungo Gong Chik na son jumde ke chik sambarang zu yin son. Tata le saba tata rang rev mi yong ba yudu ta ngarang su che Drigung ro ma tin de ha ma wo san chan za cha ro ko yore ma do ke namjun nga so khajun la antana la ko yo sambang ngimba mala che na jorwa ngimba rang la mi si da da tham je da rang ke je jumde ke ji sambarang zo ko to ne yong ko yore den de le jumde si bandala je ni hi ting ne ji ko yore le jumde si bandala ni hi ting ne ji ba yin na teni chu sha ma dra ba la da pin to ja chim bo yong ko yore le jumde la ni hi ji bo to ne teni je jin de je ki chun da tham je ke ji la njuran ro ko yo ba ma da ba yin ba lu chu jin yin ba de da we je ha ko to ba je yong go yo re the drama jong ba yin na teni cham re ji gang an ro tin che yong bu kap su teni loyal ma shong ba da ba ke je sam no khor ne teni ti kap su te no ter chap jin zo yong ba ndala so ba yong go yo chang teni jikting ke thoni wi na yang sam no tong ne je le ka le jo tang sam no tong ne ke ja hi jun da kar chin yin ba yin do dambe chu go to ne ya chin hi tin jun de kar chin bo cha de yore chin hi te yang je le jum de dong la jam nin ji gang la tene ma da ba lu chi jin de so gang la ta chin hi tin so ma yin na tene de so ke tin din me chin nang ke je jabzi le som da jura tang thap ko yore je le jum de tang jam ning je tang ma da ban de su ko la je sam no gong ba hyuk chen bo mi den ki dan da ke gang za je nyam ning ro je cha ja chen bo ma chen bo zo ba chen bo se shu gom de ke na ya den cham sam so ti ke je le jum de tang ma da ba la so ba la gong ba ja chen bo mi ba ke tene dan ke chung ro de hyo yong go yo wa de za ta chung hyo se na tar so so la gang an che yong ba kap su tene so so ge je so ju ja ma da ba ne wa cha yong wa na de so ro wa chung chi hyu
Kare gyön cheshere?
ta so so la che ne dang ra za ra bon ro chong de tene sam yo ne de ban ro che yong khar ne tene
Kale tabo işte.
tene che yong ma si ba ji song song sa man ro che khar man de so tene be de ma da ba la so ba dan ra ge che sam no de la bak cha tim bon jin jo ma tha ba ke chung cha yong yo ro
And then secondly, Khenpo said, and bless me that Dharma becomes the path. And for that, mainly, we have to gain certainty in karma, cause and effect. So in our text here in the Gong Chik, Jikten Sumgön had said that karmic ripening, cause and effect is the manifestation of one's momentary thoughts. So the karma one accumulates now, one creates now, may also ripen now. It often happens when we are unmindful. It is normally said, we say that if you have a negative intention, then again, a negative repercussion or something will arise, will ripen upon yourself. So it's the momentary manifestation of one's own thinking, one's own mind. So it's therefore important that we gain certainty in karma really from deep within, and that will surely be of benefit to one's dharma practice. So with such a certainty in karma, then we reflect on the nature of all phenomena and how they are all compounded phenomena and changing moment by moment, how they are impermanent and how they deceive us. So this kind of thought will arise within one's mind if one understands karma. And then if we don't practice in this way, if we don't think about these things, then when we encounter sudden difficulties, often it's just too much for us. We can't take it. And then because we are overwhelmed by the situation, we often make very grave mistakes. So in the world, therefore, it's important that whatever we do, we first think, or whatever we say, we first think. And also that's important in the Dharma, to sustain such mindfulness. So with mindfulness, we are mindful of karma, cause and effect, of love and compassion, of impermanence. And then if we are mindful in this way, then surely in this life, we will be able to bring about some change in our dharma, our mundane activities, and our karma. So a person, however, who doesn't have a very strong imprint of thinking about karma, love and compassion, and impermanence, that person might be very diligent practitioner and practice meditation, like Mahamudra and Dzogchen and the middle way and so on. But if they do not have this contemplation of karma, love and compassion and impermanence really ingrained in their mind, then in the end, that this kind of state of mind again will run into difficulties. One will make mistakes and so on and encounter difficulties. And then, for example, one runs into a situation, a lot of difficulty that seems impossible. So one feels that how could that happen? And one feels really overwhelmed in those moments then because one has not created firm enough imprint of the reflection on impermanence.
Matabar databatam legend and the solar, Gomba Hundu Song de Baina, on the Larry, Sita, Kangaro train, a Larry, Song Yado Tang. Our touching drain degree, Tatarachi Kangachi Yorin, that younger Yore, young Ching drain degree, Seva, and the dust Certon Yordan Yamling Neche, Matabala Soban, the Tsuganache, Lodonam Yala Soban, the solar. Je gomba hyukchimbo yo ba tanda kanza ena teni je kangan theba dang tanda ke nature sungwa ena yang jern zamlen ji yang gus je ger so so suna ena ya kangan thede ta jing den dugri je yong dugri samyan da leri samyan da wo je cheg ton ya dong yong ya dang dong gu ton na da samno de dong de ba de re da de so leng a ju je nan chong da wo je hyon ro yo re de nga chu nan chong je ya le ke teni 철라 난총 제용 받다 차도 요리면서 파치고 동다 총총 레스는 난총 제나 파 나면 난총지 투크요 말에 파 난총지 못하고 좀신데 철라 난총 제용 받다게 하고 용거 요리 디토네야 삼 줌레게 삼바란조세 된 딩히 띵거와데 하장 가르침벌에 하자밥들게 손에 딩히미 베gebjurdangs goyer shor ton da dang jinxi mi be gebjer dang goyer shor ton da dang dera jinxi mi be gebjer da goyer shor ton da sanje lamla tha rengwe song do
goyer shor ga kon mare
gwa nor song jo to ton ba che da no da de da yin za jinxi mi na teni che gewa drum che je du je na ya teni tin hi ma tin tu kandar sanje lam la tarong tharing bori song do de yin zang tin ngarang su nam ja jun de tin hi tin go go yores.
And so somebody who has habituated well to the understanding that things are impermanent and one's understanding on karma, cause and effect, such a person, when they run into difficulties, they will take it lighter and think that, oh, this is just karma, this is what happens, it will be okay in the end, it will all be all right. So they have reflected on the meaning of those words, and now these words are actually applied. So a person who has meditated, reflected well on impermanence and the four thoughts that turn the mind, when they encounter difficulties or when they observe difficulties in the world and so on, they will just think that this is karma, this is what happens, and it will all be all right. So they are able to think about the meaning of those words they have reflected upon in this way. What we often do, however, is we neglect this thought. And if we neglect the thought, we are kind of letting it down. If we let it down, it will let us down in return. So it's a small thing that we do. It seems to be a small issue that we neglect, but in the end, when it comes back, it is something that we won't be able to bear. So this is what we need to understand, and this is what it means that karmic ripening or cause and effect is the manifestations of one's moment-to-moment thoughts. Tsapato Rinpoche had said that practicing virtue without mindfulness might lead to misunderstandings such as nihilistic views and so on, and therefore one is very far away from enlightenment. So even if one practices virtue, if one lacks mindfulness, then one might be very distant from enlightenment. So therefore it is very important that we cultivate mindfulness on an ongoing basis.
Lam trua sevar chinje lo son ta trua sibande ta hi gando ta je lo chu son ro chu lam den ro yong du le jum de dang tene che zo go ma ta pa la so ba ke ne wa che ta wa yin den chin yong go yo wa ta nyam nyong go to ne nyong yong go yo re ta de so ya kong pa ro ya nam pa ran du tene ta chu tam je juma da malam ta to juma da malam ta ngang ni ya je lemden de lo mi ban de ta chur yin do ban de la tene lam chua se war si wan de yorwa tenda yin zang zo de yang je jin hi rang la to de yore jin hi de la tene zong zhi ji go yore zong zhi ma zhen na tene xiao gar cho zhou ran zhe ke song ne gang la le lo jie yu be de la chu gun mi ba yin song da ju le lo jie de na tene ji chu de ji ding ke xiao gang yin na yang zhou ge yo ma ri song ri den zan jin xi din se ren de ne jie ran yin gen be zong zhu go wan de ji cha yang ge yo re pe na ju ma sa la ra wen de ji ju dong de jia de na lu chok sang go wan de la yang jin xi din ge do de jin xi din des ga len do ang ne den ta del zong zhu si ba de ge zong si ga le zong go yo re zong zhu xi zong xi ba de hu zong jie ba ran zhu xi ba de men tu ne ba jun jiang wang de le ko yo ba me ji le xie sa ge to ne ge jia ji xie ge na ga len do che par ge no ge kar ka do pa lab de na ga le ge yang me do xie sa ro chi 책 진이 라군 다제 진시 띵 거도 어떻게 진시 띵 데조 데비디 갑레 요레데 텔 갑레 데다 준르게 베 도고 요르와 준르데 강아 데니 코라니 드르혀 비엔데 데니 타마 준르데 자카테 고 요레데 델 띵네 데니 가란조 던다 인장 베 진시 띵 시반달라 준르게 잡죠 고 와데 가르치 모리스.
And then third, Khenpo said And blessed may that confusion be cleared away on the path. So first and second of his dharmas, where we said, bless me that my mind becomes one with the dharma, and bless me that the dharma becomes the path. So here we have reflected on and understood karma, cause and effect, and impermanence, and we have also gained some experience in that. And then that experience, this familiarization increases. So it becomes continuous. And so then, at that time, when confusion is cleared away on the path, one perceives all phenomena as like an illusion or like a dream. And even though one perceives it that way, karma is still undeceiving, unfailing. So also here, when we request that confusion be cleared away on the path, also here mindfulness is most important. And in order to be mindful, we need to be diligent. Shabka Tsokdo Rangdrol had said that whoever is lazy, one who is lazy, will accomplish nothing, neither in the world nor in the Dharma. So to be mindful, we need to be diligent. So even, for example, if you're sitting down in a cross-legged posture physically, for that also you need to apply some mindfulness. So mindfulness means some difficulty, and there's an effort. So this term, diligence means a difficulty. So diligence in Tibetan is tsundu, and the first syllable tsun has to do with this difficulty or this effort. And dru, the second syllable, has to do with sustaining something continuously on an ongoing basis. For example, if you want to talk to someone politely and not in ordinary language, if you want to be very honorific and polite, that's quite difficult. It requires some effort. And it doesn't require much effort to talk in ordinary language. But if we just have to say one or two words in honorific language, in a polite way, then we need to be very mindful. So mindfulness is related to difficulty and to effort. We need to apply effort. And that's diligence. Applying effort is diligence. And so diligence and effort, or this exertion, the hardship of exertion, struggle, and in the end, diligence gains victory. So it is important to sustain mindfulness with such diligence.
The Namjung Atsoka Yin la Hesabin, the Kamur Nayan, the Karchimbo in Bajumsi, Jake Carreri, Sina, Taya Tompo, and Rawaton Jekeja Hubaina. Nga longer mean song Yorana, Nga lonju zupuker mean Yordan, longer. Lutuker me. Nga longer me. Ye chuker mingorwa. Me servan de carne mingo your dig sound carre. Long the rale de Urio. Long carrel rale de Rusina, Ishik long. Also Chetan Zawala lule tara longa yore. Longa nani Jimbala Tony Lega Chindu long the Ishik long the Surjurta Bayina. Ishik long the Surjurta Bayina. Ngarang to choose go is that ding chan de kala, what time near and roy or mine. Churan Kiji Rezam, come a rezam, Hisan or Chin and J. Kejaji hit by a Ishik long the Pichu Chiungo, Tin Hit and Yam the Sing Goyra. Chu Keja Tsiri here do young. Da be Chi Tinhimi Batoni, that Hisami Batoni, that the Keja Lambrodi, Korak less under Hoyro. Korakle. Then there's the Tamjala sum of the Jumde taking Tawala sum of Tonda or that and Darigasi. Magic Gano, oh, Hesa Japa in a magic Gano, or teach the reason. There they hajang and dig the Yuri. Dibu Jumsin Carre Simjin Gana Gawain, Sinchachup Sanganyamli Chada Yurinda. Chanchu sing nyamlin cha de yore. Tendra yin zan tongchong nayang ji maji sing a zun tongchong de maji di ge je lejim de chungchong de solan tongchong maji ne. Teni ya sa go yore den zang nabja jun de je lu ge to ni je julam xiexian to wa ka che tab de ba yin na yang. De ge zhu ge so su lu zhu ge min ba la ta ni re dong go yo ba. Teni 이게 진시 띵반데 다 가인 추주걸 민바데 상하가 남들라 고요는 도에 남들라 고요레 송거 요대엔자다 맞어 두소 돌아 다 아니디 지고 지탐나 야보요레
So it's actually very important that we speak very politely, like in an honorific way to others, because from a higher perspective of practice, we say that the body needs to ripen into nirmanakaya, and the speech ripens into sambhogakaya, and the mind ripens into the dharmakaya. And the ripening force behind the ripening, what makes it ripen, is actually wind energy within ourselves. And in order for our body, speech, and mind to mature, to ripen, we need to develop those wisdom winds or energies. So when we talk to someone, we are using our throat, and so the winds in that area are moving at that time. And if we are mindful when we are talking by speaking to someone in an honorific or polite way, then we are able to transform those winds, the movement of talking, into wisdom winds. And when we do that, we are getting closer to the Dharmakaya. So in just one moment or for 1 minute, if you're speaking with mindfulness in this way, speaking politely, you are actually using your wisdom winds because you are mindful. If you're unmindful, if you're speaking with unmindfulness and not in a polite way, then you're accumulating samsaric karma. So in this way, we think about karma in a very subtle way. So, for example, if you think that I'm speaking polite to someone, so then in order to make them happy, then that's actually also fine, because it is said that if you make sentient beings happy, that is virtue. And this then it's in itself also becomes Dharma practice, so you shouldn't minimize even such an act. So we shouldn't minimize even the slightest virtuous karma because it accumulates if we sustain it on an ongoing basis. And so likewise, the more you try to focus on your body with mindfulness, being peaceful and subdued, and your physical activities, you're stepping closer to maturing your body into the nirmanakaya. And when mind sustains mindfulness, it will mature into dharmakaya. This is how it is explained in the secret mantra, in the Vajrayana teachings, as well as in the sutra teachings. So therefore, it's important to make an effort in this.
Then samsan tinhi la ne yang tendra che lugatone magupa da ngagatone hiesa me ba tendra yong si ba re de tini yang ti ji su tinhi tingo sa che yore gares o da nga ta hi tendra ben tinhi la song samne tini tinhi tin sa de hyakpa re hyakpa la hyakpa ji ne tendra che manten da tendra go yo ba res.
And so sometimes we lose our mindfulness and then we act in disrespectful ways with our bodies, and we say something rude with our speech, not polite. And then again, when that happens, we should again bring up mindfulness and recognize I have lost my mindfulness and confess. So this is how we should practice.
Ta tini de gambo bag chu yeba de chua yi hisan chawar sinji la songo yoro ta de den chua yi hisan chawala tani ta ngarang zo ke je chua yi hisan chartang de ha go go yoro ta ha go war si bala yong na tusam ji go yoris 다 간상가래 제와 ngama 장금 침보 요데바 당제 단다게 이나 쳔달라 제 투삼 믹사 투삼라고 제 마제나야 되네 저그 또바침보 딘데바 단다 요르와데 라마게비시니 나나레 가사드 갈라 망보 요리 대타 ngazo망 요산라고 제이나 다 투삼지고 요 된다 인자 감보바게 손에 닌딘 뜻자베 추죠 세요르 감보바게 손여바 닌딘 뜻자베 추죠 데나나 레 당보바게 투삼라 닌딘사 시 닌딘사 가레 데네 다 냠뇽지나 곰돌라 닌딘사 손다 데다부 토니 데니 트라이 히스 차고 요레 마도게 데니 트라이 히스 차지로 곡데네 데니 남힐 차르제 진데 마르와 코 짐데 인사드 다랑가랑 저거 죠사고 요르와 데니 죠테다
Then the fourth Dharma of Kyobpa is blasphemy, that confusion will arise as wisdom. And so for that we need to know how to make it arise as wisdom. And to know that, we have to learn the teachings, study the teachings. It's possible that there is someone who has already trained and practiced in their previous lives, and then they have a natural knowledge of things and do not have to engage in much learning in this life. There is many spiritual teachers and other people all over the place, but most of us do have to learn and practice. So Kyobpa elsewhere taught 10 dharmas to make an effort in, and he said a beginning practitioner must make an effort in hearing and reflecting, and then make an effort in practice. So if you make an effort in this way, then confusion will appear as wisdom. And this is how confusion appears as wisdom. It is not going to appear as wisdom if we just wait for it to appear as wisdom. One day it will appear. One day we will die. So it's all interdependent. It arises due to karma. So we need to create the causes for confusion to arise as wisdom.
하야 다테 다제 삼농 진신혼도 숨부터네 데네 강쇼 휴화르사비 추데 데네 조반지디 숨정군 번제부 담치 공바직 반데레 데는다라 제당 도르송 자당 압직에 띵크요 바당 데네 달라 좀 듄당 린탑데 제바 요번한게 다드렌 좀 듄바데 휴버가레 데네 좀 듄바데라 도르송 쫑아게 띵크요드 다 드랭 쭉직 바데레스 데데 가레게 띵스는 주미 주바메시 란주 바송 데게 띵크요레스.
So reflecting in this way and cultivating such mindfulness as a preliminary, then we listen to the Dharma, and the Dharma we are receiving is the Gong Chik, the Buddha's single intent by Lord Jikten Sumgön, consisting of 150 Vajra statements, 7 sections, and an appendix. And so now we are in the 7th section, and the 7th section consists of 15 Vajra statements. And now today we continue with Vajra statement 11, where it says, since there is no emanation without cause, they are the own continuum.
단데 주바 시반달라 지당 예완인로 세요 요바레 지톱 주바시 지톱 주바시 가르스나 베나 초그 주버거 스만라오 조이 주버거 지와 주버거 라소반달라 지톱 주바 쇼요레 단데소 담지죠 띵바데 사만트레스 다 곰종 그트바스다 요레 다 곰종 그트바세 용반데 지 로버더 지 심진 라마라 저 용반 나 용바 낭잠네 양 양로와 단단다 만보 용거 요르와 단데소 담지 지 주진의 마투바타고 토니 지 트바스 지용 용거 용바 단다지 인로 요레스
Ti gom na chung rồi.
gom zong le gom pa gom ne da ti gom to
Gom
ku
Kyobpa.
gom
Kana
zong
gom nyam len chena tene shagare.
tena ti top ku sunga la ora
Tini chetap sana ti tunzang kuthegara.
kai se
Chetap.
ti top si de dai ko rong che 다 제왕아 마 간다르체 종훈 송다고 띠떡 종 그요 버려
So it says there is no emanation without cause. So emanation, so generally speaking, it is said that there is basically two kinds of emanations. One arises from a previously created cause, such as, so here emanation being like a nirmanakaya, an emanation form. So there are, for example, the supreme nirmanakayas, and there are the the created or artisan nirmanakayas, and there are the incarnated nirmanakayas, and so on. So they arise in dependence on certain causes. And then the second is there are certain emanations that arise without any specific causes or conditions, who just arise like momentarily, like to a sentient being, for example, and then the next moment again they disappear. So generally speaking, it is said that there is two kinds of emanations.
다 곰종 그트바 센저 조제 베나 띵인제 라소발라 데네 줌처 띵 고요라다 줌처 더소 탐제라 제 주메 바 그트바 따버제 은데네 이인도 고요라만 보게 대인자 단 더소 탐지 줄을 뚜리 요레 somebody ndikapse jumi trupamse ranjuba sen ranjuba tsekni yore ranjuba sevandala ndikapse ranjik ranjuba sibade che tamarke zimbandol kondo ya che yore chedang ranjuba de kwa mangbo yore uma ranjuba se che yore da kantan ndikapse ranjuba sibande juji nangge yang da tarate yishi ge juji la tuide ba ko yore Zumcher Lasopatine, Tene Zumcher Jingani, Tene Ramra, Truban Ramranji, Umban the Sotamchi, Yishik Dakin Latin, Jonkoyori Mato, Yishik Dakin, Juchin Zodra, Yishik Juchin Latin, Jonari Matoke, Jimmy Ravole, Jonkoyoba Mares.
And so this second emanation that arises without causes and conditions according to others is an emanation that arises from like as a meditative experience. Like, for example, when we are in a state of samadhi, then sometimes miraculously something manifests. And so others claim that this is an emanation that has no cause. It's just like a magical manifestation that arises without any cause. And so then here there's this term, they are the own continuum. So there is no emanation without a cause, they are the own continuum. So this term own continuum has many different meanings depending on the context. For example, in the Madhyamaka, there is one school, the Svatantrika, which translates to those who propose or who kind of advocate own continuum. But here in this case, it refers to that there are causes and conditions. There is a continuum of cause and condition that leads to that result. And so basically what is asserted here is that these miraculous manifestations do not arise randomly without causes and conditions, but they arise from the cause of primordial wisdom.
Dan de inza chedan sanje gendo to sunana ta trupa manji bungon hondo tingin zinda dan da tabala nyambar jate
Trupa maji ngunla?
Trupa maji bungondo zumchar mating hondo tene tingin zin Teni durzo wambo dan tumbe teni troba cheta wajin nango yo na de dan tumba ke teni tingin zena nyampar jo batam jo sungku yo bayris ten za troba tam je la ya jo ngod yishi ge jijin de ngod rogo yo res.
For example, in the sutras, it says there are stories where first, before any emanation appears, one first places the mind in a state of samadhi, and then, or the Buddha places his mind in a state of samadhi and then manifests from within that state of samadhi in whichever form necessary to tame a certain individual. And so, therefore, there is a cause. So this emanation that appears arises from the primordial wisdom.
Te inzang ta tarate ndona na mamji jarpo jumbe shibun dona na jola timpen kepa chumdin de so tani tawa ta dun mga shin legendary nami kona song tawu mundar chula chan salo so.
And so it says in the Druma Kinara Sutra, I pay homage to you, the master who is dependent on causes, the exalted one, who never holds a view of the two extremes, who only teaches the ripening of the result of karma, and who is free from the darkness of views.
Oh, that teni machi dragon juba sarva yang karasonga yore shuna chu tamji jui jisun roa song jin la ra le ba song sipit zawa jin song molam ji to zhang ba o song da ju rev jing min ba la ya ju jin mang bu chang go yo ba re.
And then it says in the Shatro Sutra, all phenomena follow causes, depend on conditions, are associated with the root of existence, and are led by aspirations. So many causes and conditions need to come together in order for a result to ripen.
Da teni dorji song juni ba de sanji shija dinjin zhenjong ge song dan de song go yan de yang dara de yin ge yang yi ba la ji ge kai he da dim zhe da ma yin ba da ji yin ro yo re re den ze ji dang de ni jikten song go song de da ge tam ji din jin de ban ju ge cha de yo re so.
And then we come to Vajra statement 12. It says, the Buddha is a body of dependent origination. That is in response to some people's claim that there are bodies that arise free from dependent origination. So Jikten Sumgön says that all bodies arise due to dependent origination.
Then the yin get correction tera gong yoresina chama go pen a longer down drugun so yin nang ris yin gan nang wang ke hya yong ari ma do ta yo mare ndo je gong do yorba dong to la dong dang ba la yin yang jikten sung go sung den da so tam je ya ting jin zhe wan jo wa cha de yo ba re sung ba re.
And so the reason why others make such a claim is because they regard the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya as an appearance that is the other, so not self, but other. And for this reason, on the ultimate level, they maintain that, therefore, it doesn't actually exist. But Jikten Sumgön says that they arise, but in the following interdependent origination.
And there are Jujin Tinder Pusum Sobal Dine Yongo Yorimadoke, jo ingarwa jo chik taw yangma chin chik taw le tine yong to patan ra ma re si sama jujin la ra le de yore perna nga cho je chu ji ge gong hang to bar sa wan de yang jujin puson cho ba la ra le de yo ba re si ta nga ran cho je lodo nam yini ya tene jamjin je la so ba chaja jin bong ga din la so ba ke nyamling ge rempe drune ya yong go yo res perna meto kang chi saung yi na ti saung de la khola dambo sa go yo re tene lu go yo re tene cho go yo re tene du go yo re ta deso tamje ko jo cha de yo re meto de saung de ke ya ji war se bu jo cha de yo re jin xi ban de la jin gar jin dang zhawa dang tun jin dang din ba si jin gar jin da zhawa ga re re se na me do sang je sa na yo na ko lang gar jin dan tun jin da ra ju de zo pu som cho de yo ba yin na yang gar jin pe na ja da jiu dang zi zi la so ba ge sa song wa yin na ten ko lang de mi to ko ma ro ga tane de da ba Koran life to book a parche to so than Tarsonwa. Te Tavaji, Tam Pusum so the Matsawa me ba Koran Goya gang, Jalando, Mupondo, Matsang ba me ba go and Yindo, then Chujukolayan, Tetar, Lonkolayan, Tetar, Trukolayan, Tetar, which go is the good Jumtin de then in Sanjaka Sai Pardo, Korwa, Tanyandi, Chu Tanji, Timder La Rale de Yobari, Sumbarwa.
So everything must arise from a perfect, the interdependence of perfect causes and conditions. So nothing arises just from even just one cause or condition, but various causes and conditions coming together. And so also in order to attain the state of the Dharmakaya, that attainment also depends on the coming together of perfect causes and conditions. And that these conditions are to practice the stages of the path, starting from the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, and love and compassion, the 5-fold path of Mahamudra, and so on. For example, the seed of a flower needs earth and fertilizer and water and warmth. These are the causes that make it grow into a flower. And then there are various disagreeable conditions, and then there are favorable conditions. So even if the favorable conditions are present, if unfavorable conditions arise, then the seed will still not grow. For example, even if the favorable conditions are all there, but if then a bird or a mouse comes and eats the seed, then obviously it cannot ripen into a flower. So to be completely free from any sorts of hindrances is what we call perfect causes and conditions, being complete, nothing lacking. And this is also necessary for the attainment of the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya. So until we reach the state of Buddhahood, all phenomena of samsara and nirvana arise interdependently.
Ta sanje ge kusumbo kusum ku yikunga kare na dan da so thamje yang jujin timde la ra le yong ge yudu ta chirtang ke che jitin khor sabyan da so thamje yin da yin per na me to yin sam no tang khor yong ba yin na teni ngene je da Tony Don Jumre ni the dang si che tawan thorin yin the Jumre le tsek cher tsi cher Jumre la zamni cher rowanda ta chu lam ton ro yo ba ta cha yong go yoris ta je tawan thorin yin the Jumre la che de se yong ba dan da cha yong du teni ta so su ju ba shor si de gandar ta gom chu son ya cha yong go yore ta gom chu son ya cha yong du ya cha wa tel tu ba ke teni Tawan Tartuk de Zotoku Yomari, Zo Sina Tawa Tartuk Yundi Yonsu Batsur Zotoku Yomarwa, te inzang dusu tone o sanje ji kusum bonde jumre la ra jumre tin la ra le yure sanne tanda sam no korwa ina toni tone jumre ni de dang si bande la kwa khatok pa le in ro tabya la pindo chimbo yore.
And so also the attainment of the Buddha's 3 or 5 kayas depends on the interdependence of causes and conditions. And then, of course, also all of our worldly and samsaric activities, or if we just think about a flower and so on. So if it is said when one realizes emptiness, emptiness arises as cause and effect. So when one realizes emptiness, one's regard for karma, consideration of karma increases, and one will be even more careful about karma. And that is a sign that one's dharma has become the path. And so even though one's view might increase if one denies or neglects some karma, then one's view has been lost. One's practice or one's conduct has been lost in the view. So then one has separated the view, the practice, and the conduct. And as a result of that, one will not complete the ultimate qualities of the view. So also the attainment of the 3 kayas depends on karma, causes and conditions. So then when you recognize that, then you can actually directly say and understand that how when one realizes emptiness, emptiness appears as karma, cause and effect.
Tandalat ngate song koyo Jikten sungute song da le jumre la ngi hi chi za na chu sarmi ji khata yang zumpur da song ta te yang chek je ta wa yin da mang de he ja de ta le jumre la ngi hi za na je chu khatung ge dor dan cheni chi ban da so tam je ta zumpa da wa cha da sen de he da yong ge yo wa nda pa je de he de te nge mari hyo to ge mari de yin na yang le jumre la ngi chi za na chu sarmi je khata zumpur da ngarang zu namjin je ta chu hie chu nyam ni jin le jumre la che yi chin do chi hi yo wa di ge yi chi de dang le jumre la ngi hi pe na to ni de jumre ni de char dang yo ban de ta be ke jumre la ngi hi chi ba de ni rin der jin du ta tong ba ni la so ba to ne jumre la yi hi chi ba de ha jang ke la na me ba cha de do si Teta tahin aran zogu che katung gebjor chin do bokas le jumre yuri si hi endo bokap je le jumre li ichi dalete chung ri ya si paje nda kwa le na tene toni ton jumre ni de dang se ta ko ya ta wan thoren yin de le jumre la ni din cher yong wan de kwa de ji ba cha ge yuri sam
ji chanda kar
ha
ya bo je dang ji ka ko ina ta chanda shi da ko
le
kare song do
le jumre la mi hi ji za na se
근데 지카고 라이는
de chu sami ji khata jang che zo ge che dang ne ngarang zo namjin da che chu hie no ya no chu pe nan katung ge jo ha ko
지금 직 사마하고 나 단다 시다 하고 단다 시다 미시 가래 직바 연구리
ala nge hi de da
그런 식이데
no ta toni du ta jumde la pe to khong ji chen bo jumde la kar chin sa bo thong yong ro ta toni ma to bo ga su jumde la jumde zo hyuri san do yak san no din do toni ma to bo da
마동은 라디나
toni ma to ho la nam ju ma ran zo che chu do nya me ji bo ga le din do hyuri san ya san no din do tan di sam no da ta toni to za de le din de zo de ha jang za chen bo de sam no de ni be de ko na ta sa che ba yo sa le
남기는 할리아 상예디
nam ju ma zo ha le sa chung
So also Jikten Sumgön had said when one gains some certainty in karma, cause and effect, then one's outer reflections of the Dharma, such as recitations and so on, do not determine whether or not one is a good or bad practitioner. So normally so it is something that we all reflect normally on karma, and so now these outer practices that we do, like recitations and so forth, we cannot say that they are not the Dharma, but so normally when we do these practices, before we have realized emptiness, we have some trust in karma, in our Dharma practice. But in terms of gaining real certainty in it, so it is that when one realizes emptiness, then karma, cause and effect appears very clearly. And so then, even though before we have realized emptiness, we might have thought that karma is so inconceivable and so fascinating and so forth, we might view it in that way before we have realized emptiness. But then once we have realized emptiness, actually the way we have seen it before becomes still quite nothing compared to how fascinating it really is when we have realized emptiness. When we realize emptiness, emptiness itself appears as karma, cause and effect.
Tema do kwa ngi matar de jesong na le jumre la ngi hi chi za na chu sar me ji khata zumbo da zend de namjing arang so che gedop tek bank win che hyang dong dong ya dan do da dal so ba ge chu du ya yo ren do so tam je dong da ma da sim na je go song ai na
dong da men da
ma do sim na go song ai na
ngamen se ya dong da men do
ngan nam ju ti hyang dong dong
dong da men do
de dong da ma do su de la kwa lang su na lemre che de se de ba no chan do jing thom po jing che ke lang lemre chawa mam bo je na mi no zu ba no chan do ya ndo
re
te yin zang da nga zo pa che kwa de da hin nga gang chi lai ba den da re san che kwa de
po chen da ta wo chik
nge la ya de che zo lo ran do ye ra cha pon de chen do ye
do
ra cha bo se na de te ma do nga so ke le jum re se
ine yang nga so di thon da men do sam na ni tham bo ne chhe tuk ma ra ba
te ra dong da no ding ge ra ma re nga so ti sik je dam de he ja da ja do da de he ta sik korang ke sik pa sik le tu na ten ra yo yo re de le jum re ni hi chi za na chu sar me ji khata ya sa me ji zumbor da se di ta che zuma re de yo no che khatung ge jor ke to so che te a sa dong da mi jor de so ro rin do ra te re sen te de so le jum de thai tra wa de wa lem de wa de lem de che se do wa no che da se che su ko yo mar de ko a ten ro cha ro yo ra se.
So this quote by Jikten Sumgön is something so that we must understand really what it means, because we might also misunderstand it, because he says so that when you gain certainty in cause and effect, when you gain certainty in karma, then like outer reflections of Dharma practice, such as recitations, do not determine like the quality of your Dharma. So one might think, when hearing this quotation, one might think that, well, then this means that our virtuous practices, like reciting prayers and other Dharma practices, then that must mean that they are meaningless. But if one thinks that, then one actually really denies karma, cause and effect. One minimizes the effect of karma. Then one just thinks that all of these practices are useless and have really no end. And so then, so we shouldn't think that way, because actually we also engage in these practices because of karma, cause and effect.
Da dendra yin zang nga zo dara chu ju gon da wa yin yang chu ge ran yin number da ba ni ba da de ni hu je da sam ba sang chung jo la so ba ge tok ji ge ba ge dam ja ge de gen ta dang de ni dur za ge de pen nang ma The Taman Zomne, Teni longer the Drogatanji Nang Yonko Yoris, in there Tamja Timder Reus, and the so Masana, young, the young to Yomara, Timder Masang to Jing Masana, Tenico, Corona to Bake, Nubat Center with me took me by Inzang, the Zotam Jian, Jujin Chad Yoris.
And so, when one has realized this state of the naturally pure Dharmakaya, that is preceded by, first of all, having cultivated Bodhichitta, having taken the commitment of Bodhichitta, and then also through the power of Bodhichitta, one then has practiced with faith. So then Bodhichitta and the faith of the disciple come together. So when Bodhichitta and devotion come together, then through the interdependence of these, then the Nirmanakaya and some Bogakayas can manifest. So they also manifest due to interdependence. If one of these conditions is incomplete, is lacking, then they cannot appear. So their power cannot fully mature. So also those kayas rely on causes and conditions in order to arise.
Te inza ngaranzo jula perna chujuko nawaro hargo yobayena semla. De deba dan danhang ngaranzo ngani da chujuko ngani chango ande garerisina rangi number tapa te changdo yore. Teni ta durza Gana Gandar Della Tertunke, Teni Nawa Sharbake, Teni Tukji Lasoba Mundan Roande, Chapsang Changdo Yori. Ta Naranguni Del Naranzunguni Changu Jete, Ta Perna Depa the Tanhang Riva. Ta Depa Sirjun the Jerdan Naranzun Doi Chusang Chaka Yori, Depa Sid, Tanang Sibande, Nak Chusang Chaka Yori, Mayosala. Then the Deba Shiba Najan Garanzo de la Gawa Yoba, Drua Yoba, Muba Yoba, then the Sotamji Tango Yoran Aranzunguni. Then it Danangs and the Da Siduji Longology, Da Ninzin Dan, then it Jamala Soba Dane, Dikitini Naungola Sharguade, Dalata, Danang Serwang Aranzo. Then the Deba the Danang Davate, Gareta which had the Urisina. Then you chug no zama, David Chad Yuri. Then is Hanji Jukunda, then in Nankala, Jimmy, but Dawana Inji, Chandu, Tati Dawa the Chanama Hargoyona, Tawo chug no delaya zama, Lemeba. Then it did Dawa the Jinkor to Yong, Zobaji Hargoyona, Daronji, long you deva mayemba, chug the long you deba mayemba, Rwa, Balabla Sobakeji, Yodavam, took deva mayemba, Gondova. Then the solo pay linging in around Sujula, Namdo Meba, Jinshi Timban, that the sort Sango, Mamboji, Gondova. Sanji got Dawata, the Naranzo, Sim, Chotamata, with Nana Sharasiba Lion, Naranzo Munije, Sango, Chaking Mambo Hugindoa. That is a Jujin Timder, Sevanda, there.
So then if the Dharmakaya of the Buddha is to appear within our own mind, certain conditions need to be complete within our own mind. And mainly, we need to have faith and we need to have a pure perception. So the natural purity is already complete within us. Then we need to develop the other conditions of faith and a pure perception. And then as for the Buddha form to appear within our own mind, the Buddha appears in whichever way necessary to tame beings. It is the Buddha's prior motivation, his intention of bodhicitta to appear, but that's just one condition that needs to be complete. From our side, we also need to have faith and a pure perception. So generally speaking, faith is a Dharma term that comes mainly from the sutras. And pure view, a pure perception, is a Dharma term that comes from the Tantras. Faith also, within faith, also certain qualities must be complete. Within faith, there has to be joy and enthusiasm and aspiration. And in terms of pure view, a pure view is a mind that is free from the stains of dualistic thinking. One sees things in a pure way if there is no dualistic grasping. So if you have faith and a pure perception, then you become like a clear water vessel, so a vessel that is filled with clear water. And the Buddha Dharmakaya, which is like the moon in the sky, can then be reflected in the pure state of nature of your own mind. So in order for the moon to be reflected in the water contained in a vessel, first of all, the vessel and the water need to be clean so that the moon can appear. And then other conditions also need to be complete. For example, there shouldn't be a strong wind, or the water must be free of like waves and things like that disturb the water. And then the moon can appear in the water. And so likewise, it means that our own mind is free from the disturbance of thoughts. The mind is mindful. So that is the still, pure mind. And within this clear and pure mind, the moon-like form of the Buddha can appear. So for that to happen, many causes and conditions need to come together.
다 대다고 그제 tunjin zong ba chapchang zomba yina teni da soso semla teni sanje ji ko kharbala techom mo ba chad yore son den de dubzi de jatsap jambang gombo ke garson yore sena jetar bendu saye zangma la lawang luch zungni nawatar devyin rosem saye zama la
So when all favorable conditions are complete, then there is no doubt that the Buddha form will appear within one's mind. And the quotation that establishes this point is by Maitreya Natta, who said, "As the reflection of the body of Devendra appears on the pure ground of Vaidurya, similarly, the reflection of the Buddha's body appears on the pure ground of sentient beings' minds." And it also says the cause for perceiving the Buddha in the mind, which is like pure Vaidurya, is the purity of the ground, the increasing faculty of irreversible faith.
Munjuk longer jur yingbang royoso. Munjuk longer jur yingbang yoso. Tanda munjo sende mumba janchuk semdela yawani mumba semjin jukba semjis. Tanab sen yung yorwa. De rita tambo yingi yisote hubayina. Mumbun drive, mumba semjigin drive de trukatang. Tene jukba simji de tene longju zo bak ri son tirtan dan da yiba de chertumong ke da ta yiban yige yore yina yang da jikten sungong gu tumama bi yichor jela da mungba simji yoro mungba simji de yang tene longju zo bak jungne jenaren jungmo jani de jurgo yore sum de sum yore
Then we come to Vajra statement 13. It says, from the preliminary resolve arises the Sambhogakaya, and from the actualization of the resolve, the Nirmanakaya. And so this preliminary resolve, it refers to the aspiration, the bodhicitta, the aspirational bodhicitta. So there's two kinds of bodhicitta, the aspirational or the bodhicitta of aspiration and the bodhicitta of engagement. And so others say, and here others claim is like the general, the way it is generally seen. So generally, it is said that people claim that the result of the preliminary resolve is the arising of the Nirmanakaya and of the actualization, the Sambhogakaya. And Jikten Sumgön's unique perspective is that this preliminary resolve or the aspirational bodhicitta, it is from this aspirational bodhicitta that the Sambhogakaya arises.
Tachata mumpa simji se de garenrawore shuna ngatso namjun tabar ma namkha danyam be sinjin tamje dewa dan din donghar dang thar nyur de lana me ba yang da ba zubu sanje je gomphang rom bo je tobar shas denin dala de ta mumpa simji chade yore.
So this preliminary resolve for the aspirational bodhicitta is the prayer that we always make. We say, may all mother sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, may they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, may they swiftly attain enlightenment. So that is the aspirational bodhicitta.
Ta mumpa simji ndala Quran nang la ya jirta top che jong rawo je yorba. Yoba jimsinde kanza nyamni jidang ka thon chagdwa. Per na chap jing garchen ro je ganda son. Ma namkha da nyam be simjin thamje dewa dang devjo jamche da dimbar churche. Dongha dang dongar je danzin da tawar churche son te sungdwa. Son de kare ha ko thor ten dong do bukap so chi tok je te san ro sam da tok yi ban ro te bet Quran ti nang la chi ngone ka chi ti ka molam nang da char kandar tok dang xian ni ma sung ya dang tok de ni ko nyam de yu de ban ro je go yong ba de zam ma che ba ge je darong che ti nang la je ta jam je je nya san je go ju zhong ma jam je yin de ba da de le je tin hi tin de ba dang Tenin korwa ge danzin in de ba tela che tin hit in de ba ta te ta che ha ko yor te ma da namje nga zon de dewa de deve je di mar donghar jo ta je jo kare deve jo kare donghar jo kare sa no tong ho yo mar ta tong ko yo mar se tong kin yo je re de ma tong kin ta nga da nga ra na ngone che zu ji ja go ya ro cha ge yor de son don de kang da yang ta la mum ba sim ji se de re.
And so then within the aspirational bodhicitta, there are different levels depending on how one practices it. His Eminence Gachin Rinpoche, for example, always says, when he says that prayer, may all mother sentient beings have happiness and loving kindness, which is the cause of happiness, and may they be free from suffering and self-grasping, which is the cause of suffering. And so when he says that, then really the words that he speaks and how he feels about it in his mind are actually kind of together, they're in harmony. So it is because it helps us to be mindful of what actually is the cause of enlightenment. The cause of enlightenment is love. And so here we are mindful of that. The cause of samsara is self-grasping. And when we say that, we are mindful of that. Because normally when we recite this prayer, when we say, may all beings have happiness, and the causes of happiness, may they be free from suffering, and the causes of suffering, we don't actually usually think about what actually is the cause of happiness and what actually is the cause of suffering. And so maybe there probably are some who do think about that, but for those like myself who do not always think about that, that is something that we need to change. So that is the aspirational bodhicitta.
Tan jukpa semji sernu kareta vachiri sena pena ti chi de lunga isum gewala kor sangdwa songdwa te enzan ti chi de lunga isum lu gewala kurdu tani ta chezo go lu toni megewa tangjinan zem gewa drabanda chagayuri ngag goni tani mege yala so ba pane te doso ge tani ta xiandun don ya dang tani ta chuxie yang dezo tamje nga gewa chagayuri tani temena yang nga je de bai na yang da nga gewa charwa tani yiji goni ta tok tingin zela nyamban joban dezo tamje chayong yore tan de indu dalan jukpa semji singusu je lalin du ji yung yore ten zan shanti dewa ge pe yan song yore junjok chimanana churang yor jilan ro go yonan ro sam besam no te mumba semji res ro wan du set ten ro sam te mumba semji ro aye sen ta chungusu kompa ja ten ro no ba de jukpa semji res song ro ba ten zan mumba dan jukpa chibe ni ta teta vechiris dordu samshina.
And then for the engaging bodhicitta, here that is related to the prayer where we say, and for this purpose I will apply body, speech, and mind to virtue, and so forth. And so then we actually practice. We, for example, with our bodies, we refrain from negative actions, and we practice virtue. And with our speech, we avoid engaging in the 4 non-virtuous actions of the speech, and we practice their opposites, such as recitations of prayers or teaching the Dharma, or also observing a vow of silence and so on. And with our minds, we settle the mind in a state of samadhi. So when we actually engage in practice, that is the bodhicitta of engagement. And Shantideva gave an example in the Bodhicharya Vatara. He said that the aspirational bodhicitta is like the intention of going to a certain place. And then the engaging bodhicitta is the actual going to that place.
Ta te enzang andi kapsu ta mumba dan jukpa ni hyubarawa jirtang ta mumba dan jukpa sendu mumba simji de jachebri se ta hyuyma ta te jachendu ta te ke longkun rugu yoris longku de jache ge chewa longku de hinkam de na ya hinkam jachewa dene zeba ge yongdin tele tamche yang ta trupu ge le ba yin dene longku de jachewa yore song yore yongdin tamche te yinzang ta dene mumba jula ta hi gang la song song tara jula tin ben keba jumdin de somba jin de je jula je chimbo sakwa la tine ndewe chimbo mimba je chungchung sakwa la tine ndewe chungchung mimba de jumde mla bare te enza ta mumba simjin de perna je mumba ja chewa sen de je ne ge wang de sen na ta shinkam yongsu zo ba du ge wang de se ba yin na de ne ma da da tu chama za dong yong ge yo ba teni samno ke top yina teni dag sambo top de yin hi bu top chuji yin ge top tamje zo de ne ta mo lam ja yong ge yu du ta de ha jang ge ja chim bo re so de ha jang ge mong ba de ja chim bo cha du de le du ba ke teni rewe je ming go yu rewe ka ming go yu sina ko ming go yu ro ko ming du ta ko tara de long ju zo bo ko ming ge yu re so
And so between aspirational bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta, it is said that the aspirational bodhicitta is vaster, more vast than the engaging bodhicitta, because the aspiration bodhicitta accomplishes the sambhogakaya. And the sambhogakaya is vast, infinite. There are also infinite sambhogakaya pure lands. So when we compare the activities and the enlightened qualities of a Nirmanakaya with those of a Sambhogakaya, then the qualities, the activities of the Sambhogakaya exceed the Nirmanakaya. As you mentioned before in that quotation, the Buddha, the Blessed Lord, is skilled in causes and conditions. So karma is unfailing. When the cause is great, the result is great. When the cause is small, the result is small. Karma is unfailing. And so the aspirational bodhicitta is much more vast, for example, because in terms of location or place, they are the perfect infinite pure lands, which are really vast. In terms of time, the Sambhogakaya binds together the 3 times of past, present, and future. Transcends the 3 times. And in terms of the Sambhogakaya's mind, the mind is the coming together of 3 powers. The power of one's own intention, the power of all the Buddha's compassion, and the power of the Dharma Dhatu. And so for this reason, the aspiration of this mind is really vast. So the aspiration is vast, also the result will be vast. And the vast result that ripens is the form of the Sambhogakaya.
Jirdan dahi gangla hyun ba hesa sin. Jirdan hesa hibanda da mulam hibanda ni ngo dawo re. Mulam ka su kare re. Chu teha che yapo zambo mi deba ji na yapo zambo che yong hyo sin mumba mulam ja ge yoro. Yu deba che tirang la yapo zambo yu deba ji na ta de gong de yang per hyo mun tu jun tu ne de da yong hyo sin ji su yerang wo ta ne mulam ji ing ge yoro ba. 다 소소게 제 회사당 대소 탐지를 섬 당와이나야 몰람 그 콘센트로 요래 베나 주 대하제 미바제 르부 용디 미바제나 주 요바제 요 대바제나 텔테 인도 회사자 대진도 다 대고 문투네 준투네 대다고 용효 시바 찌바래 문에는 몰람 시반데 the ta nga so che simba zambo yo bo thoni dik ta da wo ji tu ne de ni chek de te yong nge ta hi gang la hyun ba nyumo bo long hyok chen du de ke nung hyong da wo de de ni be he sa me ba de ni chek zu bon da so chama de ni yong go yo re he sa dang chek zambo da so yi shi long de ge kun lang yong go yo du ta dara de be 야가 장아 참아 되는 연구요. 다 무람 센도 지다 무시디 조데 굴홍 돈이 삼나 당요. 그 굴홍데 구조 장킨 라오데 롱차다요. 롱데 이식 롱그 간달 내가 지연 거 여러와 대인자 nga 그제 다 남자 준도 진시 띵터 맞다 자게 요래 당 가해제 삼긴데 체수라고 진행야 연구 여러와 다 대나 그 로가리마도 그 다타바도 소소게 제 진신도 띠 마터바드나 이왕도 혈송아 이나네 응네 다 점문트네 대베가 다 곰자시반데 짐방케나 곰랑케 송 지티 송고 텔라스 줄바제 간도주 강는 녀송아 이나요 곰시반데라 텔라스 당와제 미데와 띵키로와 다 대단 참만 라고 네네 참마 용로 탐체나는 요데바제로와 대인자 타르토 소소랑라 핀데 요르 소소라 이시글롱 시바데 로쟁나나 다지 문에 소소가 드바냐면 약보 집값을 로쟁는 다 장까지 주야 요리마도 그 딱바리 희롱데 용데와 차가요 말에 대인자 된 마요사는 유몽글롱 전로고 이래 유몽글롱 되니 니마르를 lap에는 니치 직동다 위주송아이나 텔라사버그 레사는 된 코안들 망코야 레사 되니 야보 잠보 나지 통부터 봐 tanda chando yore de yenza molam seje de che pecha na dab jig na yo de ba
Niti chitong songsa. Niti chitong.
per na nyama che lo wo
Anga andang khatse lapsong.
ni che chik dong wo ni che chik dong de da pecha che molam hi ba de pecha je a lin de ne nga so da de che hin kom hi lo cha sang ra molam hi ba dab je a lin de kha sen de molam ri de wa da da su su ngun ni jiang che de ma ri de wa da ding ge de ma ri wa ngaran zo la mola ja yong ki nang mola top chi ki sore che sore se na tambo mola top chi ki ja ang ke ngaran zo lama ge shi ni ngaran zo mola ja na mola top chi ki de yin song re kan sin na samba tak pa de ni zewe sin de ba de ni kulhong ta ba yin pin rang to na ma do rang dong pa za ya ma de ba ro wa de ni they take the navya jun de tabak to ne je yin la pinya ke take jan song de ni dim ba cha yon du ta de ne ba chi ris ni ba de so so lo mo la jang kin ke de so che pama su su pama ke so so lo mo la jang yon na ju che ren lo ja ze yon na ngone top chen bo yu song do wa kan san koran zu sam ba de la hle mi ba yin ba song za Jikten ke to ne wen na de ni dro bo dang dro po mo tam je mo la de da wen koram ya do de yin zang ngaran zu ge molam si ban de da na ya jun
pama kron zu men lam ja gera
ma zo zo molam ja ra
zo ro gi jera ba
de ne ba yo re se de song do
pama ra ba pama gi chedo ma ra ba
nga zu pa ja na yo re da pa me chor ja
na kerang songa de ma ra
ma re pa me chor ja yo ba pa me ngaran zu zo molam ja na tin de ne ba chen bo yo song do de so so la ze wa chia tam je ge de ne molam ja an de molam de ne ba chia yo ri song do ba mola ge ne ba de pinyon de so Kyobpa la so ba la garen jome de so de ni nge gang la de yin la din ba hue ba ka so hue sin ba de la chama hue den ken za ra
manlam ti sare pula khande pensong ai
dong ring bo yo nge hue sin ta zo yu jin koran sa to na
manlam ko la ra
mola ge ne ba
manlam ge ne ba ko la
ne ba ka se yo me de Kyobpa de so la dong do ji nge hue sin ba yin la din ba hue ba ka so de so ji ba yin
speaking politely, in honorific ways, and making aspiration prayers have about the same essence. They're very similar. For example, when we make a prayer, an aspiration, for example, when somebody is not so good in the beginning, then we pray, may it be better, may it be good, may he be good. Or if somebody's already good, then we pray, may they continue to be good, and we rejoice in their goodness and so on. And then also when we speak politely in honorific ways to someone, it's very similar to this aspiration. So for example, just like before, when somebody doesn't have good qualities and we speak to them as though they do, then it's like an aspiration for them to have good qualities. And if they already have these qualities, then it's like an aspiration for them to always continuously have those qualities and so on. So being like polite and making an aspiration are quite similar actually. And so basically whatever is within one's mind, if the mind is positive, then it will also be reflected in the words one says. And if one's wind energies of afflictive emotions, the afflicted winds are stronger, then one will not say polite things, one will speak in harsh and unkind ways to others. If one speaks politely and one speaks in a kind way, then that is driven by the wisdom winds. So all good qualities come from a motivation that is driven by the wisdom winds. So it is this term aspiration, it has to do with motivation and like an intention. And if the motivation is a certain way, then it is what happens is that the aspiration arises due to wind energy. So it's the wind energy that kind of drives this or moves this aspiration. And if it is a wisdom wind, then the wisdom wind is moved toward that aim of aspiration. And so this again depends on our mindfulness. So whether or not we use those wisdom winds. Of course, there are some people who intentionally do bad things, but mostly when we are not mindful, then we become controlled by other, like our afflictions, and then that leads to much negativity. So before there was this statement by Jikten Sumgön: if you're skilled in mindfulness, you are skilled in meditation practice. So that's really the ultimate advice. No matter where you look in the sutras or the tantras, there surely isn't any higher, any greater instruction than this. Everything is in that instruction, really. So ultimately, it is really to one's own greatest benefit. Now, there are some who might really intensely practice, and for the most part of 1 year, for example, mostly use their wisdom winds. But these wisdom winds normally do not just always arise. For the most part, we are controlled by the afflicted winds. And the winds are also related to our breath. It is said we have around 21,000 breaths in a day. And if they become positive, then if they're moved by wisdom winds, then our actions become positive. So aspiration is not just a prayer that we recite. It doesn't mean that you have to pick up a book, a prayer book, and recite a prayer. That's not all there is to an aspiration prayer, because it is really an aspiration, a state of mind that we ourselves can have at any time. And it just depends how strong it is, and corresponding to how strong it is, a certain result will come. But now if one's own, now there is certain individuals who we say whose aspirations we say have stronger power, and that is because their minds is pure. For example, we say that the power of the aspiration prayers made by our spiritual teachers are very strong. The prayers are very powerful because their minds are pure and they have love in their heart. So they have a completely pure motivation and they have an altruistic mind. They only think about others. They do not think about themselves. And then that is their state of mind, and therefore their words of aspiration will correspond to that state of mind, and therefore their words are more beneficial, more powerful. And then the second level would be one's parents. The prayers that our parents make on our behalf are more powerful. For example, when they say, have a long life, live 100 years, and so on, that's more powerful when our parents say that, because the parents say that with a completely pure intention. And that's why it's more powerful. And then also it could be one's friend or someone that loves you very much. When they make a prayer for you, then the power of this prayer will be greater because it comes from a completely pure intention. So in the past, when I gave teachings on the 7 branches in relation to the power of aspiration prayer, I told you a story of Shariputra. So you can refer back to that story. It's a pretty long story.
Tene da mombat sajite molam de jachewande drubzi garina drubgo yorisina papa zambo job molam nande nangke tartuk jorpa jetsam par semjin malu tayang de yinde jetsam le da nyumo tar jorpa dag molam tayang de zamoso.
So a quotation that establishes this point about the vastness of the aspirational bodhicitta. There's a quotation in the prayer for excellent conduct that says, to bring to an end the karma and mental defilements of as many sentient beings as fill all of space, that is the limit of my aspiration.
다 데르테니 다 트르부거 시반데 양 죽바 심지는 중화 요바데 더 손도아 지arpo cepjimchu 제테니 대긴 힙바 rumboji 닝보 시사와지 요레스
Drum rve.
동르야 통통제
Ti ming chik kare.
대긴 힙바
Mare king Kyobpa ti ming kare. Chip chik Kyobpa.
cepjimchu
Chip chimigyo.
지arpo cepjimchu ke 테니
Teaching Shepa ming.
대긴 힙바 rumboji 닝보
Rinpoche Nyingpo.
콩라 테니디 tarhate jarpo tsebjume chuk lakpa ni la chume ni tene gola chume yana o tene younger che amazen tene kongla tene u phuda u ke ta chuba phuda u ke marmi u ke chuba phudera
Sangela.
na tara sanje deyin hiba boji nimbola tene tikin rebe ke tene deyin hiba oba me te jarpo tsebjume chute oba me ke jiwa ngamara oba me te jar deyin hiba oba me te jares tan deta yan jukba ketoni trubaka njwa
Oba me Drupeko.
mare oba me njwa oba me trubaka oba me ka deyin jarpo tsebjume chute oba me ke ta jiwa ngoma zela chade jiwa ngoma zogo ni ta dambo tsebjume churwa
Ti hakosang ina Drupal Druku ke tangta khare.
jukba sing mus lalin tara
Ina Drupeko ma rve. Drupeko. Druku.
truko ra
Ra.
truko kola
So Druku sore.
ta tara de
Dinala.
tara don na tara de jarpo tsebjume chu oba me chol jorsa
Ti Druku re. Kyobpa ti Druku re. Then Oba me Druku marwa.
oba me ta truko ra cha ta
Druku ti kapla Druku re.
다 죽을때 약이 요라더라. 된 사람 가서 오바면 죽어 약이 요래. 내가 싫어요 말이야.
Ina ti kapla Oba me Druku lap chora.
네가 죽을 때 야서.
There's a story of then how from the engaging bodhicitta, then nirmanakaya arises. So in the past, there was a king called Tsipki Migyu, and that was the time of a Buddha, Rinchen Nyingpo, so jewel essence. And so this king was making a light offering to the Buddha. So in his two hands, in the palms of his hands, he had two butter lamps and also one on his head. So he was trying not to move and made this an offering, this light offering to the Buddha. And as a result of having made this offering, this king later became the Buddha Amitabha, then the Nirmanakaya Amitabha. So this is how the actual engagement became the Nirmanakaya.
Oh yeah. long cho xong. Oh yeah. Ta ti od a din dor ji song chu ji ba de ke kusum ta de mi jin ji ba yin song re. Dan de yang kusum hi ba de ta de ro dan de yin gi ba ze na yin se de nga chun de gong ning ge yo ma re chu lo yin ra ji bo gong ning ge yo ma re. yin se de ka re nga rang zo de na te de yo re nga rang zo ga je kusum de ta de yin de ban ra ji zin ro ge yo ba. Trukasena che longkasena che tene chukasena che samaro tene ngoni kasena che dewa chimbo lunju truba kasena che ta te ta che semgutone ransin ta te bandawo che zinro den nondo ma to ke yang sebra yewa ta kana kandro ke tone yong yorba ten zan dala Jikten sungu ta dara zo ko samra chulong trusom chukolong ko trukosom de tade me bare so jikbare so tade me ba ma che.
And next is the Vajra statement 14. It says the three bodies remain undifferentiated. And then others say, so again, when we say others say, we should not think that we're speaking about like other religions and so on. Actually, it's something that does arise sometimes in our own minds too. So what others say is that three bodies are revealed at different places to different retinues and within different teachings. So others, at times we might conceive the three kayas as separate. So there's a separate Nirmanakaya and then a separate Sambhogakaya and a separate Dharmakaya. And there are separate Svabhavika Kaya and a separate great bliss, spontaneously present Kaya. And so actually this separation that we create is only something that we make up in our own mind, with the thinking in our own mind. And that is actually mistaken. The Buddhas, the Kayas appear in whichever way necessary to tame sentient beings. So therefore, Jikten Sumgön says that the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya are not distinct, and moreover, not just are they not distinct, they are actually one and the same.
Tan de ying yi bare na re ngarang zu drink yo na re de gari to na sam ko yong re na pe na zo je chu ge hi ba de yin hi ba ko na ge ju yo re de ban ra je ji long ge hi ban de ne jang chou san ba tham ji ge ju yo re de ban ra zhu ge hi ba de ji bo de ngarang zu je nang jo ba da ba da ma da ba de za tham je le de da ban sing ge yo re es dan de da ba cha ge yo ma re ji dang de za gang la gang de ge je yuksa ke ne je ta de de ba da ji dang de ni sung ju ge chu tam ji de sa de za gang la gang ping ge to ne da song de ba da kan je ba dong ya ba yo re wes na yo re is per na triple ka ta be ji lun so na ya tu ba right jog yo wa roa right jog la teni tuba rai drog la soba ke toni teni rodon ze ban de la soba ke tribu ke la sam chi bo la sam ta wa na sam je ma cha pa yore de yin na yang ta ko sum de don ju ngo ke toni ta ji ba ma do ka ka we ne yo ma ris perna nang ka la da wa je khar yong ba yin na ni da wan de sabye la chunu som ya ba na teni dela pa ba ke dawa de chunu som na dawa som khar yong go ro teni chorang ge ye ya na ye khar nga khar yong de yen da ta ko nga dang ko som tham je de ta we cha de yor ma do dawa ngo la che par me ba ta re.
And so others, or also ourselves, sometimes think that the Dharmakaya is the sphere of the fully awakened Buddhas, and the Sambhogakaya is the sphere of the Bodhisattvas, and the Nirmanakaya is our sphere, where the Nirmanakayas appear to impure, tameable ones. So we make the separation in general, but this is actually not how it is. The Buddhas appear in whichever way necessary to tame beings. And so one may wonder, do they then appear in separate places, and do they give certain Dharma teachings according to the needs of beings? So yes, they do give different teachings, and activities may vary. For example, if we just think about the Nirmanakaya, we speak about 6 Buddhas who appear in the 6 realms of samsara to benefit the beings there. And if we just think about the Nirmanakaya is inconceivable. But ultimately, the Nirmanakaya also is not separate from the essence of all 3 kayas. So all 3 kayas actually are one and the same. They are not distinct. For example, in the sky, there's one moon shines. on the ground, if you place 3 vessels filled with water, then in each vessel the moon is reflected. So then you have the reflection of 3 moons, or 4 or 5, and so on, such as there is 3 or 5 kayas. So they just appear in this different way, but just like the moon, in essence, they are inseparable.
Tenda yenza kusum hiba de tade mi bande jubsin malare pa ka sonrwa namto yishin ning bojin namto yishin ning bojin so lundrup jumde nisumi kusum rang la changza na gomi ngu de chirpa yin so gomi ta gomi kusum yermi yemba to ondu gomi ngu de chirga yores kusum tade den zimben zimba yone zonde gomi ngu de chirta ko ta gomi de ngaran zo namjur yega ta nangge ta toshu ti chade yorwa den de gomi ngu de chirwala kusum tade den zimben zimba de chargo yor kusum la tade den zimben zimba majarna teni ngaran zo namjun chi zungwa dan zimba tade den nang de na wandele charta jortu ko yomarwa te yenza kusum hibande dong tola ngo yemi chade ba te ta ha ko go yoreso.
So the 3 kayas are not distinct, they're not separate. And also Milarepa said that. He said when one recognizes the 3 kayas to be complete within oneself, within the essence, recognizing that the essence of thoughts is primordial wisdom, and and that the recognizing the essence of thoughts as primordial wisdom, and recognizing that the 3 kayas are non-dual and spontaneously present within oneself, then one has actualized the stage of non-meditation. So basically, one realizes that when one realizes that the 3 kayas are indivisible, one actualizes the state of non-meditation. For as long as one holds the 3 kayas as separate, one cannot realize the stage of non-meditation. So of the 4 yogas of Mahamudra, non-meditation is the highest stage. And in order to actualize it, to realize it, one has to separate from the grasping at the 3 kayas as being separate or distinct. For as long as one cannot see that, one doesn't separate from this grasping, one will also not become liberated from the dualistic grasping at subject and object. And so ultimately, the 3 kayas, in essence, are indivisible.
Tanda kusum chik the to hibande yanchi ha ko suma zamji pink yomarwa o kusum chik inkada samba zamji te yabo ri de ina ya soso rang rig yishi juyor was soso rang rigba ande soso rang rigba ande chuju ko yimba ha ko yore nishin ring go yore rigba ka rigba randang de teni longchu zubu ko yinba rigpa tsal jikde zubu ko yinba ta te tabi ko rigpa jikla sanang tama yina ko songke newa ndra yinba jik ha ko tabgo yores ten tarto undi rigpa korang le tan korang nya jik chada yora
Kar chada yore
rigpa korang ko te chada yora rigpa korang
korang ko
nga so ko se slow la nyon rosa ke yo marwa ngarang su rigpa ande Gores.
So one must realize the 3 kayas as one. And it's not enough to just understand that intellectually. Of course, it's good to understand that. but to actualize it is not enough. So we have to recognize that the kayas are within one's own intrinsic awareness. So one must gain certainty and understand that one's own awareness is Dharmakaya. And the natural manifestations of one's own awareness are the Sambhogakaya, and like the natural gradients. And the creative power, the energy coming from one's own awareness is the Nirmanakaya. So in this way, one must understand how that the three kayas are complete within one's own awareness. So therefore, the ultimate kaya is really one's own awareness.
Da kosum chikpa imba dropa den gombo sampe chuji ko le mayu par tripuran yin na so ji la so ba ke drukuyores.
And then a quotation that establishes this point is by Maitreya Natta. He says, the great compassionate one knows the world, having gazed upon all worldly beings, he manifests without deviating from the Dharmakaya, and so forth.
Thank you very much. Sunande tamje zeba nye towa nye be dana banze de jege nanje balan ba super zolen rowa yo jambar bawe jedran jemba dan gundo zambo de a de jende de da gunje jiso da loves Gyoanda da tamje rado ngo may every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently